Wonderful. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today and share some insights around optimizing focus and mastering distractions. And I'm just getting my slide up in front of me. Perfect. Here we are. So optimizing focus, mastering distraction. More specifically this morning, I thought we'd look at the why. Why would we want to optimize our focus and master distraction? And what's the fuss with multitasking? Why do we need to know about this? And is there an alternative? Is deep work the alternative? And how? How do we strengthen our attentional intelligence? And I thought I'd finish up with a really super quick takeaway. As tech people, you've probably heard about Hick's law, but you might not have considered it in the context of the number of optimal email folders and the time saving that it can offer us there. So before we dive deeply into the content, a little bit of context. And when it comes to optimizing focus and mastering distractions and all things related to productivity, whether that be time management, energy management, or attention management, the trifecta, as I call it, of getting things done, there really isn't a one size that fits all. Some of the tips and techniques that apply for one person may or may not apply as easily or have as much relevance for somebody else. Probably depends on our fundamental personality types, the type of work that we're doing, the responsiveness elements of our responsibilities, the stakeholder needs, all sorts of factors consider whether a productivity technique is going to work for us or not. The good news though is it's all learnt behaviours. These are skills, attitudes, habits that we can hone and add to our repertoire should we want to. Some of what I could be talking about today could feel common sense. And, you know, if you're hearing something and you go, oh yeah, duh, Wendy, I know that, I really urge you to go that next step, please, and think, am I leveraging that? Am I applying that common sense concept? Because the funny thing with common sense is it's often place, rarely commonplace. So why? Why would we want to optimize our focus, master distraction, and get things done? Couple of points there, and of course we all have our own individual and very valid and important reasons for honing our skills around productivity. But some research, if you like, to provide further context is something that comes out of Harvard, being that the most motivating condition we experience at work is making progress towards something that's personally meaningful. And in order to be able to make progress with the meaningful things, we normally need to be really good at getting stuff done. And in today's modern workplace, key to getting things done is being able to optimize our focus and master distraction. I also am inspired by the research that comes out of Google, and specifically its leadership research. And Project Oxygen, you've probably heard of it before, has looked at Google's high-performing teams and high-performing leaders, and has a top 10 attributes of what makes a great manager at Google. And most of these skills and attributes can be extrapolated to any workplace. Well, being results orientated and productive comes in at number 4 on the list. Number 1, of course, is being a good coach. But people like to work with organized and productive people and managers and leaders. It sets the scene for all of us. My take on it is being able to master distractions, optimize our focus, and enjoy this motivating sense of making progress towards something that's personally meaningful is really a high performance habit. And my energy, attention, and well-being is up to me. So, you know, our research at iMastery is also consistent with this. At least 65% of our pre-masterclass and workshop attendees acknowledge and feel that they could indeed be more organised and productive at work. So let's jump over to multitasking. If you can see the screen in front of you, it reads, the meme reads, hello, you're not multitasking, you are just doing lots of stuff really bad. And the neuroscience is in support of the sentiments here of this actually somewhat humorous meme. And when we're looking at the brain, the areas of our brain that does not multitask is called the prefrontal cortex, or the executive function. And again, if you can see this slide, I've highlighted that area of the brain blue. Now, the image is a little misleading because it looks like that our prefrontal cortex, or our executive function of our brain, is a large area of our brain. No, it's a large surface area, but from a volume aspect, it's only 10% of our brain's volume. Now, this prefrontal cortex, or the executive function part of our brain, is what is responsible for us for many skills, including our working memory, our cognitive flexibility, and our impulse control. So we use our prefrontal cortex for planning, prioritizing, organizing, interpreting information, staying focused at a task at hand, and using our willpower, interestingly. I take it as knowledge workers, we're essentially paid to use our prefrontal cortex, or our executive function of our brain. And yet this part of our brain doesn't actually multitask well, or doesn't multitask at all. Another little snapshot from iMastery's research is of our participants prior to attending training, 84% of people knowingly multitask. Now, the thing is that with more that we multitask, and I've got that word crossed out because actually the brain doesn't multitask, rather it switches tasks. It might feel like we're doing two things at once, but actually we're jumping from one thought to another and one task to another very, very quickly. The more of this switching that we do, the worse that we do at everything, essentially frying our brains. And that is quite different to most activities where repetition increases our performance and efficiency doing something. But when it comes from jumping from one cognitive demanding task to another, this switching actually increases our errors. It increases the time it takes us to complete a task, and it raises our overall stress. Quite literally, our cortisol levels rise, and it further encourages more distraction. It makes it harder to use our willpower, and it erodes our impulse control, and it has a derogatory effect on our capacity to focus. So let's look at a practical application of this. If we're at our desk and we're focusing at a task at hand, maybe we've got Word or Excel or something else open, is your inbox always open as well? And if you're nodding your head to this little prompt, you're not alone. Indeed, our research shows that 93% of people have their inbox open all of the time, and they're unwittingly setting themselves up for distraction. So let's say you're at your desk, and maybe you know something about Parkinson's law, you know, that concept that work expands to fill the time available. And you've gone, okay, Wendy, I want to smash out this report. I'm going to get it done. I'm giving myself 90 minutes, the optimum time for focus. I'm not going to look at any emails or anything that comes up on my phone. I'm just going to get this work done. Ever noticed how much energy it costs not to look at that pop-up that tells you you've got a new email, or that ping on your phone or your smartwatch? It absolutely takes intention and attention not to look at that. And why is the case? Why are we so easily distracted, even with our best intentions to focus? Well, like it or not, our brains are hardwired to be distracted. From one of the preeminent theories is that from an evolutionary perspective, it has served us very well to notice things and movement in particular and sounds in our periphery. Let's envisage this scenario, if you like. We're walking along the bush track. It's a lovely warm summer's day, and you see that little slither or that little twinkle or hear a rustle, and you look down at the path and go, oh, that is a rather large tiger snake. Kids, stand back. We'll just let that snake pass there before we go forward on the path. Obviously, that served us very well from an evolutionary perspective. The thing is, we're not fending for our survival out in the bush so often anymore. Rather, we're at work in the modern place environment, whether that now be at home or in an office, and we're attempting to use our executive function part of our brains to do cognitively demanding work and rewarding work. But what's catching our attention, and our brains are hardwired to notice it, are the pings and tings from our electronic devices. And this is no longer serving us the way it does when we're out in the wild fending for survival. Just as we are hardwired for distraction, our brains are also built to ignore the old and focus on the new. Novelty, quite literally, causes dopamine to be released. Now, dopamine is the neurotransmitter that drives our behavior. It's associated with feelings of vitality and happiness, and it's kind of like the give me more chemical. Our challenge with the modern day world, of course, is that our smartphones and devices deliver us with an abundance of novelty. Researchers have shown that when they show images of a similar nature, just photos on a screen, and they've got our brains wired up, as soon as a new photo that's a little bit different from the other photos that have been shown to the participants in the studies, their brains light up. Dopamine's released, and the smallest things, our brains go looking for that bright, shiny object. So quite literally, novelty, distraction has an addictive component to it. We're addicted to distraction. Check out this data. So the average adult now only goes 6 minutes before a just check. So whilst our environments might be distracting and disruptive, our own thoughts and our own behavior patterns are also very, very distracting. So most of us now only go 6 minutes without just, oh, I'll just check my email. Just check my phone for an email, or I'll just open my inbox, or I'll just glance over there. If I've got 3 or 4 screens in front of me, there's things and stimulation happening all around us. Now, that's not particularly a problem if we're doing what's called fairly shallow work. Maybe we're already in our emails and we're jumping around different emails that have come to us, or maybe we're looking at a news article or what have you. When we're interrupted, it probably is taking us about 64 seconds to come back to where we were before the interruptions. However, if we are thinking more deeply and doing cognitively demanding work, and ideally we're in a little bit of a state of flow and concentration, when we're interrupted from that state, it takes us somewhere between 15 to 25 minutes to get our thinking back to where it was before we were interrupted. 41% of the time, we don't even return to the task at hand there and then. Giving the back of the envelope calculations on that, that's a lot of time wasted. It's more than half a day gone in distractions or recovering from distractions. I like to look at it from a cup half full perspective. If I can remove just 4 interruptions or distractions when I'm working in a more concentrated way, I'm essentially winning back an hour a day into my work day and 5 hours a week. To me, that's worth striving for. And indeed, what is the alternative? I think Lunik has a point. If we'd like to enjoy that motivating sense of progress that comes from accomplishing meaningful work, it's up to us to upgrade our strategies and our infrastructure so that we can optimize our focus and master distraction and work deeply. What is deep work? You may have come across this wonderful book, Deep Work, by Cal Newport. He's the Associate Professor of Computer Science at Georgetown University. And he's coined this term, deep work, the ability to focus without distraction on cognitively demanding tasks. So how do we take this further? What's the practical application? Our research is showing that 65% of knowledge workers are spending more than 2 hours a day on email. So for most of us, email is the antithesis of deep work. And because, like it or not, our brains seek out novelty, they seek out small movements. Email is a very distracting place to be. And if we've always got our inbox open, we're always going to be distracted. So the first logical takeaway from this is turn off your email alerts. If you're in Outlook, go to the settings and turn it off. If you're in Google, go to the settings, Gmail, go to the settings and turn off your new email alerts. I promise you, you won't forget to check your emails. What might happen is, though, you'll be able to concentrate for periods of more than 6 minutes and get some more meaningful work done more efficiently. A prompt as well, could you also turn off your phone alerts? Key to mastering distraction and optimizing our focus when it comes to email is staying out of our inbox. Now, how often should we check our emails? That is totally dependent on our individual jobs, responsibilities, and the needs of our stakeholders. However, for most of us, we can probably reduce it down to somewhere between 3 and 6 times a day. Instead of working from our inbox, which is an incomplete to-do list, oftentimes people work from the inbox because there's sort of stuff there that they've left with that seemingly practical habit of visual cueing. If there's work in front of me, then I'll know what to do. However, we're likely to be always distracted. Instead, I recommend working from your calendar and your to-do list. When we do want to focus our concentration, then we need to retreat to quiet places for cognitively demanding work. And that feels incredibly common sense, I understand. When we're wanting to do the deep work and the focus, then 90-minute intervals is probably a good idea. There's lots of research that shows that our attention cycles much like a sleep cycle, and many of us will struggle to concentrate in any deep and meaningful way for longer than 90 minutes. So could you retreat to a quiet place, and that may involve popping on your earphones to get some good quality work done in 90-minute intervals. Maybe two 90-minute intervals a day will normally allow us to really start to make some progress and get through some things. Of course, when we're setting ourselves up to focus, we want to put our phone out of sight. We want to turn off every electronic ping and ting. If it's okay for your physiology, caffeine certainly has a place. Common sense, I know we've all experienced this, but 1 cup of coffee in the morning as you're about to focus will certainly heighten that concentration. And likewise, we've all heard about the benefits of staying hydrated. Science actually shows that it will boost our focus and our cognitive performance. Of course, we all, despite the best intentions, will still get interrupted. What to do when we're interrupted? We can reduce the time it takes to get back on point from the 15 to 25 minutes to more like 5 minutes with what's called a cognitive bookmark. So quite literally, if someone comes and interrupts you and you're in that state of flow and you're concentrating and you're powering through your work, takes 30 seconds, grab your pen and your post-it note and just make a quick note of where you're up to. You know, there I've written slide 56, how to create a cognitive bookmark, so that when you've had your train of thought broken, you know what you're coming back to. With a professional appropriateness, of course, we don't need to be passively aggressive, but I think it's okay to make it obvious to the interrupter that, hey, I'm just catching my train of thought here before I have this conversation with you. If we're creating our own interruption, I like the tip from writers. You know, it's stop on a downward slope. So what does that mean? If we need to finish our concentration work because a meeting's coming up, or we need to have a bathroom break, or whatever it is, try and stop mid-sentence. Still create your tangible cognitive bookmark, and it's normally easier to come back and slot back where you were mid-sentence rather than having to start a whole new paragraph. So I'm powering through lots of little tips here because I wanted to give you a taster of some of the things that we might cover in a broader, more comprehensive masterclass. So key to optimizing our focus, is possibly meditation. The research around meditation shows that it increases blood circulation to the brain, particularly our executive function parts of our brain. Meditation has been shown to have increase our capacity to plan. It increases our focus and our memory and many, many other benefits as well. And I find it really heartwarming and optimistic, I think, that quite possibly the ancient practice of meditation is the antidote to today's fast-paced, modern, distracted world. So a prompt there for you: could you find 10 minutes to meditate? Maybe at lunchtime. Most of us will do far better in the afternoon from a productivity perspective if we take a small lunch break. So if we could layer those activities and meditate at lunchtime, that can work really well for some of us. They're just 3 of the many suitable and wonderful meditation apps that are available to us. Smiling Mind, Headspace, and One Giant Mind are all 3 of my favorite apps that I like to use. Now, if you are looking at your screens to this morning's presentation, please soak up that gorgeous image there of the greenery and the forest. Japanese have a wonderful term, I think, called forest bathing. And there's an area of science called attention restoration theory, which postulates that taking time in nature is really calming and really helps our brains to rest. There's some research that shows after some time in nature, quite literally our capacity to focus and concentrate and do the more cognitively demanding work is increased. And as much as it would be lovely to bathe in a forest, it doesn't have to be so comprehensive. Just a little bit of time in nature, having a view of greenery out your window, a walk at the park at lunchtime, all can help our brains to rest and therefore click back into the more cognitively demanding focus work when we're back at our desks. So mindful of time, my last tip that I wanted to share with you was around email folders. So did you know that the average person has 37 email folders of where things go to? And most of us have more items saved in our email programs than the local library has books. So the filing system can really be clogging us down. When we've got lots of folders of where something could go to, it creates a lot of ambiguity. It increases our decision making and our resistance to decision making, and it takes time. And it sort of creates a habit of just leaving all our emails in our inbox. Now that is some strategy, inbox infinity, that does work for some people. However, most people tend to save time with a cleared inbox, an inbox that is, approximating zero, at least got some white space at the bottom of it, the end of most days. And it's certainly one of the strategies that I talk to in much greater detail. How do we process our emails? Is there value in inbox zero? And if we want to strive for that, how do we set ourselves up for success? Get in, process our emails, and get out again so that we're not spending 2+ hours in our emails. So Hicks' law, I'm sure you've heard of it, as I mentioned, being tech people. It's the psychological principle named after the British psychologist William Hicks way back in 1952. And it explains the paradox of choice, where the complexity and number of options increases, so does the time it takes for us to respond. And you've probably heard of the classic JAM study. That's much more recent, around 2000. Researchers looked at our behaviour at a local sort of farmers market type stall, and the researchers would put out free jam samples. They would put out 24 samples and then monitor how many people came up to the food stall and how many people sampled the jam and how many people bought the jam. So when there was 24 samples of jam out, so lots of choice and complexity of decision making there on a simple thing such as purchasing jam, more people came to the stall, but far, and lots of people tasted the jam, but far less customers actually purchased the jam. In contrast, when they just put out 4 samples to taste, then there was less traffic to the farmers market stall, but there were far more sales. The less options of jams to taste led in greater decision making. So how do we apply that to our emails? Well, IBM have researched this really quite extensively. You can imagine that their high performance consultants are out there on very large billable hourly rates. And so IBM was keen to know exactly what it costs to manage an inbox. And what their research found was completely consistent with Hicks' law. How many folders is optimum? Actually 2. Far better to have a folder to dump all the blogs and posts and articles that you want to read, and another folder for all the emails that for whatever reason you want to keep. Don't bother about putting the keep or the filing cabinet or the reviewed type emails in lots of 37+ subfolders. Rather, put them all in that one big folder. Of course, that begets the skill of knowing how to search really well. How do we use the search features? And if both Outlook and Gmail have wonderful search features, and there's a couple of little tips and tricks there that you can do to further maximize that. So if there's one quick time-saving takeaway from today, please turn off your new email alerts and save time processing and filing emails by having one big folder that you put all the emails in that you want to keep. So in summary, what could you apply? We've covered a lot of little tips and points at a surface level, but could you turn off your new alerts? Could you consider processing email less often, perhaps 3 to 6 times a day, and otherwise having your Outlook inbox shut or working from your calendar or your task list? Could you be more strategic in retreating to quiet places for work? Could you schedule deep work, maybe 2 90-minute blocks of the morning or afternoon, depending on your own circadian rhythms? Would forest bathing be fun to try? More in restoring our attention intelligence by getting out in nature so that we can then, when we're back to our desks, focus more easily. Meditation and just the 2 email folders trick. So in summary, I've got a little quote here from Dr. Seuss. You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself in any direction you choose. You're on your own and you know what you know. You're the one who'll decide where to go. So I think that's much more eloquent than my attempt at saying, hey, our energy, our attention, our well-being, our ability to enjoy the motivating and rewarding condition of making progress with something personally meaningful is up to us. Thank you so much for your focus and participation today. Been great to share some tips with you.
Oh, thanks so much, Wendy. That was really fantastic. And I'm feeling a bit guilty about my, yes, my inbox right as you speak. So look, I will encourage people to ask questions of you if they've got some that are sort of burning. Felicity has asked for some advice on how do you change or influence a culture that actually responds to the early responder, so the people that actually respond fast to emails and sort of seem that's given a big tick. Have you got an answer for that?
Well, yes, run a workshop. No, but in all seriousness, a lot of this responsiveness comes from a place of goodwill and wanting to offer great service, whether that be to internal stakeholders or to external. There's also that conscientious piece, and you know, managers that are and any employee that responds quickly to an email can be seen as conscientious, and that's an important attribute in the workplace as well. However, once we know the neuroscience of distraction, it becomes more obvious that that's not an effective way to work. We have to think, you know, with the average adult having a just check every 6 minutes, like seriously, what meaningful work can we do in 6-minute intervals? And I think that just needs to be unpacked as an organisation. There's a couple of practical things you can do. I have at the bottom of my email signature just a little comment like, please note, in my quest to optimise my focus, I tend to respond to emails 2 or 3 times a day. If you need something urgently, please give me a call. There's some things around there. But I think largely it's about increasing everyone's awareness of just how small intervals people are focusing and the ineffectiveness and the cost to the organisation of doing that.
And it's interesting because I think a lot of people during this time have found how productive they can be at home when they close the door and especially when children went back to school or if they had help to help with that.
Yes.
I mean, in the workplace, though, it's very hard sometimes to stop outside interruptions. And I'm just wondering if you've got any suggestions. Felicity's just asking that as well. I mean, you know, when the team is interrupting you, how do you carve out those, say, 2 90-minute sessions?
they're really important questions to ask, and they'll be different for everyone. If we're in an office space, is there a meeting room that we can retreat to? There may or may not be. Is there, once restrictions are lifted, the white noise of a cafe is quite a productive space for some people. And the change of environment can actually help us focus. And one of the joys of laptops and remote connectivity, we can work remotely from all sorts of spaces. When everything opens up, I've still been known to retreat to the library from time to time. You know, it depends on your work culture. All else fails, the big noise cancelling earphones And it's not something we do all day. We don't want to abuse it, because then our colleagues and the people around us just get frustrated. It's about doing it in intervals and going, okay, I'm going to focus for the next 90 minutes. I'm logging in. But the more, there is a piece there where if the whole team is aware of this understanding, it makes it easier and easier over time.
I'm just wondering, it's interesting. We started the week with this whole discussion about responsible tech and how progressivism. And,
Yes.
and then Amber actually talked about the addictive nature of technologies. It's really interesting when you look at better ways of working and how,
Yes.
you know, responsible tech is actually part of our working day. I'm just wondering, I mean, you mentioned this whole idea of the novelty and the interruptions and things. I mean, you know, I know you yourself work very hard to make sure that you know, keep these addictive things at bay. You know, is there any technologies that you think could actually help us to actually, you know, counter that? Or is there anything that you can do to sort of stop that constant, you know, I think the quote was that we touch our phones 2,000 times a day or something,
I know.
that Beard said, which is
Yes.
pretty scary. And I mean, you mentioned a few things, but how do you stop the constant encroaching? Because I've tried some of these things, and then after a day or two, it's like everything starts to chime in again.
I know. Yeah, I know. You know, look, Cal Newport has a good TED talk about quitting social media. And I don't advocate quitting social media. I don't think that is professionally viable for most of us. But the TED talk, it's only about 13 to 18 minutes long. It's a quick TED talk. So if you haven't seen it, it's definitely worth watching. He talks to the point of how we just have to it's our responsibility, like that Lunic cartoon, you know, you are not my device. You know, I'm the one responsible here. So for me, I just try and turn all the alerts off every app. You know, I don't even have on my phone on the email part, it doesn't have the little red dots on it when a new email's come through. We want to remove as many sources of temptation as possible. You can set up different boundaries as well with different devices. So where possible, I try and check anything of a social nature or a personal nature on my iPad or my phone, not on my laptop. I try and keep the laptop for work type activities. And there's some science behind that as well. Our brains remember things based on some geographic information. So different devices for different activities can help create sustainable boundaries in that sense. But yeah, look, it's a life's work. And the more that you guys in tech can design things with our attention in mind, that would be fabulous, rather than the other way around.
Yes. Well, yeah, Amber shared a lot around this whole concept of calm tech. And I think quite often that's not what you feel when you're looking at your inbox. So thank you so much for this morning's session. And
Yes.
I love that concept of, you know, working towards inbox zero. I think I, for one, that's like heaven. So thank you, Wendy. We look forward to seeing you later in the year in the flesh at Agile Australia.
Yes.
We'll be back, everyone. Thank you for chiming in for this morning's session. We'll be back with Kim at 10 o'clock. So stay tuned. Thank you.
See you.